IBO World Champion, La Bella Bestia, coming to you to show my appreciation for the ring IQ. So if you haven't already,
get guard, but
wow,
Howard,
look at the strength.
follow and subscribe Ring IQ and check out the relay where they cover today's top boxing news.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news. Ow!
Okay, we'll start with this per tweet from Chris Mannix. Jaime Munguia had a deal in place to face Shane Mosely Jr. on June 11th. The source told Sports Illustrated Now. Mosely backed out of the deal this week, I'm told. Golden Boy needed to keep the date, so they pivoted to Kelly, who will face Munguia at 165-pound catchweight. That's right, this isn't even a middleweight contest. Middleweight, where Jaime Munguia has been campaigning.
All right, this is a super middleweight contest.
So they were trying to do a Shane Mosely fight. You know, a lot of people felt that after Shane Mosely won that fight with Gabriel Rosado, looked good doing it, they'd make a Mosely versus Munguia fight. So does this mean we should ease off of Jaime and Golden Boy?
No, it doesn't.
Does this make up for them pulling him out of that Adames fight or that Charlo fight?
No, it doesn't.
This doesn't make up for them matching Jaime Munguia so soft?
No, it doesn't.
Why not?
Well, Shane Mosely Jr. might be a better choice than Jimmy Kelly, but
But he's not a better choice than Carlos Adames in what would have been a WBC final eliminator that could have saw Jaime becoming Jermall Charlo's mandatory challenger, and it certainly isn't a better fight than Jaime versus Jermall himself.
well, no, this doesn't make up for them pulling Jaime out of those fights.
Even if Shane Mosely Jr. pulled out on him and they had to improvise and find someone else for Jaime to fight, this doesn't make up for them pulling him out of the Adames fight or the Charlo fight, because Shane Mosely Jr. is not a higher-ranked guy than those guys are.
No, this doesn't make up for it.
This recent revelation, it doesn't make up for it. Far too many people feel they've been matching Jaime far too soft for far too long, and it's finally starting to come to a head.
And Oscar De La Hoya actually had the fucking nerve to wag his finger at Eddie Hearn.
I believe this guy. This is the kind of matchmaking brought to you by way of Golden Boy Promotions. I firmly believe that had Canelo Alvarez not parted ways with them, went his own route to do his own thing, I firmly believe that he wouldn't have been matched the way he was matched. I shouldn't even say matched, because he made those decisions.
He did.
He's the captain of his ship.
Remember, when he said he wanted to go undisputed at middleweight, he was still with Golden Boy Promotions.
They tried to petition the IBF for an exemption to the mandatory so they could face Demetrius Andrade, but alas, the undisputed middleweight title fight, it never happened.
It didn't happen with Golden Boy. It only happened after he left them.
And it didn't happen at middleweight. It happened at super middleweight. Once Canelo Alvarez became a network and promotional free agent in full control of his own career path and his own career, that's when you saw him go on that monumental run. And during that monumental run, his marquee value, it did in fact increase. He broke the indoor attendance record fighting an unknown UK import in Billy Joe Saunders. He put up great pay-per-view buys with Caleb Plant. More recently, he sold 600,000 or over 600,000 pay-per-views with an unknown Russian fighter.
On an app that supposedly nobody watches, no one is subscribed to.
I know Canelo Alvarez lost his last fight to Dimitri Bivol. That's why Oscar De La Hoya took it upon himself to wag his finger at Eddie Hearn, saying that was the stupidest move in boxing.
What, this kind of matchmaking for Jaime? That's supposed to be better?
I want you to think about that. I want you to think about how Canelo Alvarez's marquee value actually increased during his undisputed run in the absence of Golden Boy Promotions. And then I want you to look over at what Golden Boy is doing for the fighters that they do have. The very disgruntled Sinicia Estriada.
Oh, she's fucking pissed.
She hasn't been shy about it. She's got issues with Golden Boy Promotions. And then you look at how Golden Boy Promotions is matching Jaime Munguia, a guy who's 25 years old, a former champion, an unbeaten one in the junior middleweight division, now campaigning as a middleweight, and this is how they're matching him.
Yes.
How is any of this supposed to...
These kind of fights are going to make him the next cash cow in boxing.
Isolating him from the rest of the middleweights in the middleweight division. You know, damn good and well, they ain't got no intention of matching him against Yanni Bekalim Kanuli, who's going to be in action very soon for WBO interim status. He's going to be in action this weekend against Danny Dignam.
Golden Boy ain't got no intentions of letting Jaime fight that guy.
They already pulled him out of an Adames fight and a Charlo fight. They had no intention of matching him against Demetrius Andrade to let him challenge Demetrius for his WBO title. They had no intention, still have no intention.
It's ridiculous. How does all this end?
You know, Mexican fight fans, they're fiercely loyal fans, they are. but you gotta capture their hearts and minds and their imaginations with the fights that you have. And Mexican fight fans aren't stuck on unblemished records and protecting that, they want to see a guy get out there, win or lose, and give it his all. Jaime Munguia is not being afforded the opportunity to do that by Golden Boy Promotions with this kind of matchmaking. So whether or not he'll turn out to be a cash cow, your guess is as good as mine. But I'll tell you that until the matchmaking gets more interesting, until they're willing to gamble a little more, you're only going to draw so many eyes to his fights.
Oscar De La Hoya's got the fucking nerve to try to wag his finger in Eddie Hearn's face.
What? Because Canelo Alvarez lost a fight? Hey, you're the guy who matched a 23-year-old Canelo Alvarez against the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport.
Floyd Mayweather fight.
No, Oscar, he's been wagging his finger in Eddie Hearn's face as if Eddie Hearn's got strings attached to Canelo Alvarez, when at this point, it's Canelo Alvarez that makes those decisions. It's Canelo Alvarez that decides what he wants to do. But back when you had him, and he was 23 years old, you had a genius that put him in there with Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Even if it did work out for him in the end, beyond that fight, you still did that.
So what are you matching this guy baby soft for? He's 2 years older now than Canelo Alvarez was then when he fought Floyd, but you're too scared to put Jaime in there with a German Charlo.
I happen to think that's a winnable fight for Jaime Munguia, I do.
The Adames fight as well. I happen to think that's a winnable fight for Jaime Munguia, who I know he's not perfect, but neither are they.
You can't blame Oscar for everything that happens and everything that goes wrong.
You can't. You have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis. But in the case of Jaime Munguia, yeah, I do think that Golden Boy Promotions is dropping the ball, because years ago, you were willing to gamble Canelo's unbeaten record against Floyd Mayweather Jr., the number one pound-for-pound fighter in the sport at that time. So why don't you employ similar logic when it comes to Jaime and lesser-ranked fighters, lesser-ranked champions, like a Jermall Charlo? He's not number one pound-for-pound in the sport. He's not pound for pound at all.
I really don't know how this ends, because there's still a chance that Jaime Munguia turns out okay.
He is only 25 years old, and there's plenty of time in there for him to start fighting good fighters and start amassing marquee value, real marquee value. But until he does, all Golden Boy Promotions is doing for this guy...
At least right now, all they're doing for him is getting him criticized.
I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know if this protection plan will pan out, but I know that for the time being, all Golden Boy's doing for Jaime is getting him lambasted and criticized for soft matchmaking. In other news, boxing scribe Dake Jonovan tweeted, lots of confusion in reference to Mayweather versus Moore's status for this Saturday. Mayweather claimed Tuesday it was back on. Live Now statement this AM claimed it was pushed back to October. Those still in Dubai were informed Wednesday PM that it's back on for May 21st this weekend. My Boxing Scene article with the latest, I think.
Jesus, all this hubbub over an exhibition match to watch Floyd spar one of his old sparring partners.
Literally, one of his old sparring partners in what is a glorified sparring session, because this is an exhibition match. This man's isn't even on the line.
You know, oftentimes in the sport of boxing, the context gets removed from a conversation.
Yeah, I think it does, because what people really aren't realizing and processing is that Floyd Mayweather couldn't find someone better to do an exhibition match, someone with more star power than dangerous Don Moore. Delphine Pursuit and Elem Khaled were both en route back to Dubai as of this afternoon, hours after Live Now's statement claiming the event was postponed. Different personnel have apparently taken over in efforts to salvage the event.
For my money, that's the only fight worth watching on a whole goddamn card.
I'll tell you something, I watch a lot of boxing. I mean a lot of fucking boxing, and I've zero interest in seeing Floyd Mayweather Jr. spar Don Moore, his old sparring partner, in a glorified sparring match. But Pursoon versus Mekhaled, that is a fight of some significance, of some consequence.
Yeah, because the winner of the fight becomes Alicia Baumgartner's mandatory challenger.
Confusion as to when Mayweather's previously postponed rematch with dangerous Don Moore will resurface appears to have been resolved. The show back in play for this Saturday in Dubai, United Arab Emirates. The event takes place 1 week after the planned May 14th show was forced to shut down due to the sudden passing of UAE President Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan.
Did I say that right?
Who died at age 73 last Friday. Muslim tradition calls for a 40-day mourning period upon the loss of a member of the Islamic community, along with announced 3-day work suspension in the UAE public
and private sectors.
That directly affected the May 14th card that was due to take place on the helipad atop the luxurious Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai.
Yeah, you can't fit but so many people on that helipad.
So I imagine that wanting to be in attendance is a rather expensive proposition. They are hoping to attract a lot of high rollers with long money for this thing. Yeah, but how many high rollers with long money want to pay to see Floyd Mayweather spar? That's what it is. It's a sparring session with one of his old sparring partners, which brings me back to my initial question. Floyd Mayweather Jr., given his notoriety and his celebrity, his unbeaten record, the kind of marquee value he has had in the past, he couldn't find somebody else.
Nobody?
Somebody better to do an event like this with than an old sparring partner. It's an exhibition match. Why don't you call up one of your celebrity buddies? You know, an exhibition match with Oscar De La Hoya, I think, would get more of a reception than what we're looking at here and now between Floyd and dangerous Don Moore. Nothing against Don Moore, but, you know, I watch a lot of boxing.
Yeah.
I never fucking heard of this guy.
Never fucking heard of him. I'm being serious.
In terms of star power and drawing eyes and high rollers with long money to this event, to be in attendance or perhaps purchase the pay-per-view, which I think was being billed as $15 or something like that.
It didn't cost much, but if you really want people to buy this thing, what have you got?
The inconvenient truth here is that Floyd's the biggest name on the card. He's intended to be the guy that draws the most eyes to this event, whatever amount of eyes it actually ends up drawing, but he himself, he's not everybody's sweetheart, and he never has been.
Yeah, he sold more pay-per-views than everybody, but he didn't do it alone.
That's the inconvenient truth about Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s box office success, that yes, his fights ended up being the biggest fights in the sport of boxing.
But he didn't do it alone.
He didn't, and if you think he did, you're living under a rock, or you must have been living under a rock, because Miguel Cotto had fans.
Floyd didn't do it alone.
Oscar De La Hoya, Juan Manuel Marquez, Canelo Alvarez, they had fans.
Floyd didn't do it alone.
Manny Pacquiao fight and the reception that got. What do you think, that Floyd sold that thing by himself? That everybody that bought it and everybody that paid to be in attendance, they were all Floyd Mayweather Jr. fans?
Floyd didn't do it alone.
Yeah, the fucking exhibition match he had with Conor McGregor and the reception that got. What, you think he sold that thing all by himself? Conor McGregor, he didn't have nothing to do with it. It was all Floyd.
Floyd didn't do it alone.
The thing he did in Japan with Tenshin Natsukawa. Why'd Floyd Mayweather Jr. go all the way to Japan to take on that guy if he has enough marquee value that he can, sell these kinds of events by himself off his name alone? Then why'd he go all the way over there to do it?
Floyd didn't do it alone.
Oh, yeah, I'd wager that Floyd's got supporters and fans in Japan, but so does Tenshin Nasukawa because, well, he does fight in Japan and he is from there, so I'd wager that some of those people that were interested in seeing that, they were his fans too.
Floyd didn't do it alone.
He didn't, and this Jake Paul thing that he did, the YouTuber, the social media influencer. I don't know a lot of boxing fans that wanted to see that quote-unquote boxing match. I don't know a lot of hardcores. Hell, I don't know a lot of casuals that were really interested in seeing Floyd waltz around the ring with a goddamn YouTuber. Now, maybe, just maybe, Jake Paul's supporters had something to do with that one.
Floyd didn't do it alone.
Jake Paul has a huge following here on YouTube, a huge following on Instagram and Twitter. I mean, needless to say,
boxing fans weren't interested in that shit show.
Well, you don't think Jake Paul and his millions of followers, his millions of subscribers here on YouTube, the ones who follow him on Instagram and Twitter and all these other social media platforms, you don't think they had anything to do with what that event did?
Because they said that thing sold 1 million pay-per-view buys.
The inconvenient truth about Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s box office success, some of his biggest successes, is that he didn't sell those fights by himself off his name alone. Those fighters that he fought, or those influencers or celebrities or whatever they were, they helped him sell it because they had big followings as well. In this situation with this Don Moore guy, it's up to Floyd to sell it because he's the biggest name on the card.
Nothing against Don Moore, but nobody knows who the fuck that guy is.
Sorry, I don't know what you want me to say. I don't fucking know that guy, and I watch a lot of boxing. I've never fucking heard of that guy. You couldn't find someone better to sell this exhibition match with. You couldn't find a better dance partner than Don Moore.
Is it possible that Jake Paul dragging Floyd's name in the mud has affected his ability to orchestrate these kinds of events?
Is that far-fetched? A guy with millions upon millions upon millions of subscribers and followers on social media. Is it possible that him saying that Floyd never paid him for the event they put together last year, is it possible that that could have affected Floyd's ability to put together these shit shows?
Are people hesitant to do business with Floyd, like celebrities and influencers?
Because remember, initially, this thing that they were doing on the Burj Al Arab, on the helipad, they were talking about doing it with that Money Kicks kid, who's a social media influencer in that part of the world, and that idea got scrapped. I don't really know why, but it did.
So he ends up doing the thing with Don Moore.
Meaning it's up to him to sell it because he's the biggest celebrity on the whole goddamn card. And I'm not saying that he can't. Let's see if he does. Let's see if he will.
Either this weekend or in October, or whenever this fucking thing goes down.
Finally, former junior middleweight champion Lara says people are avoiding me at 160 just like they did at 154 pounds. He was quoted as saying, "I feel strong at 160 pounds. I showed that in my last fight, and I'll show it again in this fight. I'm ready to display all of my skills once again. Come May 28th, when I come out victorious, I'm ready to fight the best in the division. I'm not even going to mention their names because I'm tired of doing that. I'm just focused on getting in the ring with all the best fighters. People are avoiding me at 160 pounds, just like they did at 154. I'm a tough matchup for anyone out there. That's why they don't want to fight me. I'm going to come out focused and do what I know how to do on fight night. Most importantly, I'll leave the ring with my hand raised."
Who's avoiding him?
The PBC has fighters from 154 to 160 pounds. They got ponies in both of those shows. In fact, they've had a stronghold in the junior middleweight division for quite some time now. They have the run of the place, and they got one or two ponies in that middleweight show as well. So if Lara, being on that side of the street, says that someone is avoiding him, who exactly is he talking about? His stablemates?
He must be.
Call me crazy, but it sounds like Lara is disgruntled with his current situation. He would like to fight in bigger fights.
Would he?
More realistically, I think he'd like to fight for bigger purses, but he can't really do that unless he can land those opponents. But I don't get it. I thought the whole thing was being on the right side of the street to get the right fights. Well, he's definitely on the right side of the street for a junior middleweight, and as far as middleweight, the PBC has at least one champion in the middleweight division. Jermall Charlo, who's been doing a lot of nothing, fighting a lot of nobodies for a long time now.
Yeah.
Lara is supposed to be back in action on the undercard of Davis versus Romero, that pay-per-view, against Ireland's own Gary Spike O'Sullivan. Lara, he hasn't been very active the last 3 years. He fought only once in 2020 against Greg Vendetti, only once in 2021 against Cornflake LaManna. This might be his only fight of this year against Gary Spike O'Sullivan.
Based on his current schedule, it might be.
I think Lara's last fight as a junior middleweight was the Greg Vendetti fight in 2020. He has since moved up to middleweight. He's been there for approximately 2 years, and in the last 2 years, they couldn't find time to make Lara versus Charlo. I mean, it's not like they have the same trainer. They don't. Lara is currently being trained by Ismail Salas.
I don't want to hear the whole, we're like buddies, we're like brothers, we got the same trainer.
You know what I see? What I see is that Lara is on the same side of the street as a lot of guys, and some of them are somebodies, but for one reason or another, the fights don't happen. And for the longest time, what people held against Terrence Crawford is that he decided to renew his contract with Top Rank, that he didn't go over to the PBC side of things. But what's it worth going over to the PBC side of things when guys like Lara aren't getting the fights that they want? Look at Carlos Adames. He was in a pole position.
He was supposed to box in a WBC final eliminator with Jaime Munguia.
The Charlo people and the Showtime people ended up doing was offering Munguia the shot straight away, the shot at Jermall Charlo, without a final eliminator. We know what happened. Fight fell apart, but Carlos Adames didn't get to stand in Jaime's place. Carlos Adames didn't get fast-tracked to a title shot the way they wanted to fast-track Jaime to a title shot. They instead conjured up Maciej Suliecki. So you tell me, what's it worth being on that side of the street when Carlos ain't getting a title shot? Lara doesn't seem to be getting the fights that he wants.
Does he want a Jermall Charlo fight?
Well, if he doesn't, what does he want? Fights with other fighters that are on other sides of the street? If that's the case, why don't Lara change his decorum? Why has he been over there all this time?
All they can do for you is Greg Vendetti, Cornflake LaManna, and Gary Spike O'Sullivan.
What the hell are you still doing over there?
What do you got, a lifetime contract with them?
So change your fucking decorum. You're so fucking avoided.
Give me a break.